Welcome back to Rewrite, Redraw, Reboot, where today we'll be taking a look at Ever After High. Ever After High was a cartoon series about the children of fairy tale characters in a high school setting created by Mattel for the express purpose of selling dolls. And despite that purpose, it's really good. Better than it has any right to be. I originally got into the series after I got into Monster High, Ever After's sister series. And I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I like Ever After High better for the main reason that it has world building and conflict that stretches through the entire series. Again, way better than it has any right to be. But it could still be better. Being produced simply to sell toys really does hold it back a bit. The biggest example of this is just the designs of all the female characters. I'm not saying they're bad, they just lack a lot of key character design principles that I personally find really important. And while I said before that I prefer Ever After for its story, Monster High was actually a better fashion doll brand if you ask me. For as tropey as it is, I really love high school settings because of the fashion design aspect of drawing these characters. Teenagers are discovering who they are and experimenting with styles that adults usually don't. And Ever After is a modern fantasy story. My beloved! So that really became my goal with these character designs. To toe that line between modern high school wear and high fantasy. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We of course need to start with our main character, Raven. Woof. I went through the ringer trying to design Raven. As you can see here, I originally tackled her redesign the same way I always do, diving right in with only a vague idea and accepting whatever I get out of it. But I wasn't satisfied with this design, so back to the literal drawing board. This time I actually bothered to try to design her. Ergo, multiple sketches and a small list of ideas to inspire her design. With Raven, I wanted to keep her goth. That was very important to me. But I also wanted there to be a disconnect between the evil queen character and how Raven chooses to dress. It didn't make a lot of sense to me why Raven looked dejected seeing that Apple decorated her side of the dorm in spooky evil queen decor when Raven dresses like an evil queen, same color scheme and all. So the first thing I did, even in that scrap design, was assign her a different color from her mom's purples and greens. Instead, Raven likes blue. She even dyes her hair the color so people can't shove those purples onto her without it clashing. She can't really escape the green though. It's the color of her magic and always will be. But as the series goes on, I want to incorporate more green into Raven's outfits as she progressively gets more comfortable with that side of her. Moving on from colors, I really tried to give Raven a witchy, gothy punk vibe. I thought the persona of really sweet alt girl that everyone is invalidly afraid of fit her really well. As for why I gave her a darker skin tone, part of it was to contrast her with Apple, but I also really like the idea that, while the evil queen is pale, she absolutely adores how Raven looks, even opting to completely remove the word fair from her vocabulary and replace it with beautiful. I thought it was a nice, sweet detail to further complicate that very complicated relationship. As for any remixes of her story or character, I haven't done any real writing for this series yet, mostly just concepts. But what I can say is that I think I'll be making a lot of the book version of Ever After canon because holy shit. Anyone who hasn't read those books, read them. They aren't canon compliant with the series, but the characterization, story arcs, and dynamics are all so much better. I think I'd even go as far as saying the first 3 books are canon in this rewrite. I can't remember anything I'd change off the top of my head. Speaking of the book, let's move on to a character who gets the most well-needed development in those books. Apple! For starters, I opted to give Apple her book canon body type. Mid-sized Apple, my beloved! I think I'm physically incapable of designing a Snow White character that doesn't have albinism. Snow White skin and hair? Yes, please. Not to mention it fits Apple herself really well, seeing as she canonically has blonde hair and glasses in the book. Fun fact, lots of albino people tend to have vision problems, a good chunk being legally blind. But beyond that, I had to include her glasses. One, because they're just a visually interesting accessory, and also, rose-colored glasses? Come on! It was basically handed to me, I had to. As hard as it was trying to mix modern alt with fairy tale witch, it was much harder trying to mix girly prep with literal princess. When people usually dress like a princess, they do so for a formal event. My thought process was basically, if she looks too fancy to be a high school student, but too casual to be a princess, I've nailed it. And I think I did nail it. It was hard, but she looks like a good mix of both. Now, I don't know about y'all, but as much as Apple pissed me off when I was younger, I really commend the writers for giving us a character like this. One that's morally in the wrong, but also a genuinely kind, caring, patient, and loving person who never stopped caring for Raven even when they were at odds with each other. I will admit this dynamic is much more successful in the book than the series, to the point where sometimes you're actually on her side rather than Raven's, or at least have to grumpily admit that she's got a point. And to that I say, good! That should be the point of a show like this. It was so wonderful to see Raven and Apple working together and being such good friends despite the tension of their opposing worldviews. It was hard, but it painted both as thoughtful, mature girls who disagreed but would always stand up for the other. It made their friendship testier, but even more believable. As the series goes on, though, I really want to see Apple slowly start to realize Raven's side more. When Raven decides to sign the book during Thronecoming, I want there to be a scene after Briar calls Apple out. Apple's helping Raven straighten up her dress for the signing, and suddenly the dawning event becomes too much. Raven starts crying. Up until this point, Raven always argued with Apple logically, saying it wasn't fair and she wanted to do good instead, and that the consequences that might not exist shouldn't trump freedom of choice. But this time she bawls, and tells her how scared she is. She doesn't want to hurt anyone, she doesn't want to lose herself, she doesn't want to lose the people she cares about, and Apple hugs her and tells her she's sorry. Then she thanks her for making this sacrifice, for doing what needed to be done to protect them. Apple tells her she'll do everything she can for her after she wakes up from being poisoned. She'll fight for a lesser punishment, and if all else fails, she will visit her every day. She promises that they'll always be friends. And to kick off the end of that emotional roller coaster, we've got Maddie. Maddie was actually the first character I ever redesigned, and the only one that didn't undergo a secondary redesign. I always had a clear vision for Maddie. For starters, I wanted everyone from Wonderland to look like they belonged in a different world, and not just clothing-wise. For starters, that meant giving her the biggest gravity-defying hair you ever did see, and that made me very happy, because I love gravity-defying hair. After that, I turned her teal. Not really sure why I turned her teal specifically, but I wanted her to have an unnatural skin tone. And the eyes! I decided that Wonderlandians have weird-ass eyes. It felt like a really easy way to unify them all without forcing them to all be the same. After that, I gave her a much bigger hat because she deserves it. I always hated that they only gave her a small hat. Daughter of the Mad Hatter, people, give her a big hat. Then came the part where I had to decide how the heck to make her outfits Wonderlandiful, and I quickly discovered that the answer was to mismatch Pattern's eccentric formal attire and a pair of sneakers into a big old ball of wonder. I don't know if there's a name for this style besides just Maddie. Seriously, I feel like this fits her so well. And I was extra proud of myself for it, because aside from clashing horribly, I don't think her old outfit really suited her or felt very Mad Hatter. Maddie doesn't change at all. She's perfect and I will not accept any criticism. What I want to do instead is give her some more respect, goddammit! I feel like Maddie never got her own story, and was too often dismissed as just mad without anyone trying to understand her. I want to spend more time on the election arc. I want there to be a moment where after her riddle-ish speech, people are talking about her being crazy, then Kitty pops up. And they tell those bastards that speaking in riddles is a sign of respect in Wonderland. It's basically like saying, I know you're smart and clever enough to understand what I'm saying, and doing anything less in a formal setting is actually considered condescending. After that, people start thinking about it and realize that if a bear eats carrots but never a steak, how much water fills up the lake, actually means Apple is great, but she only represents half of the students at Ever After, and because we've had her for so long, the river of diverse voices in the student council is lacking. And with that in mind, they decide to be co-presidents. Thank you all so much for deciding to tune in to the second episode of Rewrite, Redraw, Reboot. And oh my goodness, when I tell you that this is nowhere near all the designs I have done for this godforsaken show. So if people show an interest and want to see them, or if I just decide that I want to put far too much effort into making a video to show them to you again, then maybe we will see them. Either way, thanks for watching. See ya!